Hello, hello. We're about to go live. I can't get on Ecamm Live. I'm gonna buy that product sooner or later. Definitely, definitely, definitely. But we're here. We're going live on YouTube, and we're early today. And I don't have glasses, so if I go weird, it's because I got contacts. That's supposed to work. We're about to go live. I can't get on Ecamm Live. Yeah, I got to take my Ecamm Live classes. Ecamm Live is such a great tool. Oh, we're going to cover record types today. And if we get through record types, which I kind of think we will, we'll probably get into introducing business logic and then recording, preserving data quality. So we'll see if we get there today. Hopefully this will all work out. You guys will join me. If not, I'm just going to crank on through with my presentation. So am I sharing my screen yet? I don't even think so. I think I haven't even started sharing. So let me share my screen. And then let's see where. I think that's going to be it. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. I want to do record types. It's going to be a second for me to verify. You're going to hear me in a second. Oh, so awesome. Okay. Unleash your inner leader. If you're using Salesforce, you're a leader. Even if you're a sales rep, don't even think for a second that you're not a leader. You are. Why? Because you're leading conversations that lead to cash. Right? Now, see if I got a little bit of coffee left. Nope, just a sip. Good, because 3 o'clock's a good time to stop that stuff. Unleashing my inner leader. Unleash your productivity, your passion, your profits. Let's get going. We're going to start with record types. Those of you that are joining me not live, again, I want to thank you for putting in comments too. So as you add comments, remember there's a couple of links I'll add to this. If you're listening live, go find one of the videos. There are a couple of, let me see where they are. I'm going to do this. So my demo org is about to expire. Please subscribe to my channel, even for a little while, till I get to 100. I can rename it and make it look better. We're gonna, if you want to follow along, there is I'll put in the chat a trailhead that will pretty much coincide with this information, so you can practice it as well. And that is in. We got Patrick, welcome. We're just getting started. And we're going to jump in with record types. Thank you for joining. Now I got a human. So great. All right. Welcome, Patrick. And I can't look at myself like this. This is going to drive me berserk. Okay. I got to get all my little screens. I'm going to a product called Ecamm Live, but I need to buy it. And then I want to take the class that I bought. And then I'll start using it. So let's talk about record types. What are record types? Record types record types extend the functionality of your pick list values and page layouts so that you can better assign the kinds of data to your users that they need to work with. So in this example, we're talking about the technical hiring managers are complaining that they're seeing unnecessary fields on their pagers. And the recruiters are experiencing the same problem. It means you're loaded up your object with custom data that's being used by 2 different groups of people. The limitation there is that while you can create a page layout for each profile that limits the view of those record types, it limits the view of those records to just that page layout, regardless of the type of data they're looking at. So another way to say it is this. Let's just say you've got an account record. Sales uses one set of data, relative to the account, and accounts receivable uses another set of data, more financially based, those kind of things. Well, if all that data is on the same page, it's going to be overload to both of those groups of users, right? The salespeople are going to be seeing accounts receivable data, and accounts receivable folks are going to be seeing sales data. It's just irrelevant to what they need to make decisions about that account record. So let's say you create a page layout for each one of them. In standard Salesforce, that works just great because the page layout for sales, they can just see the fields they need to see. Same with accounts receivable. The problem comes along with when the salesperson is now in a situation where they do need to access some of that data, but it's not available on their page. Or vice versa. The accounts receivable now needs to access some of that other data and it's not on the page. So yeah, are there workarounds? Sure. You could create list views that present those fields. You could create reports that show that data, but now you're making the user go to two different places. And the real place that record types help is because you've got those two users looking at those two page layouts. What about the fields that you've made as pick list values? The pick list value might now have choices that cause the user of sales to go through a much longer list because that pick list of choices is displayed to everybody that has access to that field. So there's another place of overloading, right? You could control some of it with a previous selection of pick lists, so using controlling and dependent fields to control that. But now you're managing field by field, selection by selection, and at scale, it might become a little tasky. But the real problem is this. What if you have a profile that needs to see both ways? They need to look at that record both ways. Now they're stuck because the limitation in Salesforce is it's one page layout per profile. So enter record types. Record types, we're going to talk about creating record types, creating the page layouts, and how you combine that so that that flexible user that wants to look at consulting accounts, partner accounts, customer accounts, vendor accounts, see those things either the same or different, but have control over the data they interact with. So that's where it's going to be. So let's talk about the first benefit of record types is limiting pick list options using record types. So when you have a pick list field, one way you control the selections is by using what's called a controlling or dependent pick list field. If I choose one field, then it limits the choices in another field. It's a great solution. Record types is more of a global filter for those pick list values. So when you create a field that is a pick list field, the entire list of choices is going to be referred to as the master. The available all the available values would be considered the master list of values. And for each record type, you would create a subset of the values needed. So think of it like controlling and dependent. If you're picking a customer account record type, you want to control the pick list values for that field alone. So it's like controlling and dependent for a single field, as opposed to one pick list field controlling the values of another. So it's self-referential in that regard. So the record type becomes the controlling field, and the field itself, the values you select for that record type are the result of a control, and that is of the record type. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. So, and it just makes the data cleaner. You can still then have controlling and dependent fields, but you're dealing with much shorter subsets of data. So this is where record types can be used in conjunction with a page layout, right? So the profile can have access to a record type, one or more record types, which then means it can have access to more than one page layout, and thereby have access to the more appropriate pick list values for that page layout. So, and it's always a best practice to name the record type the same as the page layout. Does that make sense? So the technical record type would have a technical page layout. The non-technical record type, call it a non-technical page layout. That keeps your life in the future cleaner. Okay. So what the user sees when they create a new record, if they've got more than one record type associated to them, they'll be given a choice of record types. Now, on existing records, I will tell you this about record types. If you've already got existing data, when you create the record type, all of the existing records will be assigned the master record type, or the default record type, or the original record type. In Salesforce, we call it the master record type. And in order to change those records to one of your new record types, you need to add the record type field to all the page layouts so that the user can take a master record type, blank, is what it'll look like on the page because none's been selected, and convert it to the record type that it actually is. So that's one way to do it, right? But then for existing records. And then the record types that have been assigned will limit the pick list values in all the pick list fields. And the record types available in this particular pick list are determined by the user's profile or their permission set by which record types you've assigned them. So just think of it like when you create account record types, and in the profile of your user, you've assigned them the account object so they can create, read, edit, or delete. You could then, when you create record types, you could then assign them or not assign them each of the individual record types for their profile. So it gives you more control as the admin or developer who gets to see what. So does that make sense? Okay.
Would you be able to update the record type? If you create a new record type, you add the record type field to page layouts, would you be able to update the record type using like the data loader if there was some sort of algorithm you could use? Say all these accounts that are from California belong to this record type.
Sure. And that's, so the record type, once you create the first record type, you're really creating a custom pick list field on the record. That's called record type, right? You could, I've seen people without creating a record type, you could use like on an account or an opportunity, there's I think a standard field called type. And you could use that field in lieu of a record type, but you run into the page layout limitation if you try to go that way. So what the record type does, it really gives you control over multiple page layouts assigned to the same person with one profile, right? So your user record has a single profile on it. That's a limitation of Salesforce. The record type gives you that. And yes, it's just like any other data point in your data importing and exporting that you can use as a criteria for what you update with what and those kind of things. It's a good question. All right, so what we're looking for in this example, and oh, by the way, I got the email today, so I know you probably got it yesterday or day before, Patrick. Your trial, your Sales Cloud trial is about to expire, but that's a good 30 days. So that's a good 30-day trial, and just scrap it and jump back in and pick up what you're doing and get to practice all these exercises again. So that's awesome. So there are two record types for your example for positions, technical and non-technical, right? Technical position should only show IT and engineering in the department pick list. Non-technical position should only show the other departments in that department pick list. And hiring managers and recruiters should be able to use and see all department values, which means they need both record types assigned to them. So these are the two exercises where you create the record type for the technical position record type and the non-technical position record type, and add the record type field to the position layout so that you could swap that on the fly. Second one scenario, which is one that you would need to create the page layouts to reflect the differences between technical and non-technical positions and all the data that you need to collect for or about each one of those. So you need to create custom fields, assign them to which page layout. And for those of you that aren't familiar with this or trying to recreate this exercise, as you go into your developer account or one of your trailer playgrounds, go into any pick list field and add a value. And so you'll see it'll ask if you want to add that value to another record type. That's where this is coming from. And if you need help with that, remember to send an email to support@salesandtechnology.com. I'll probably create a video about it in the future. But there's stuff out there to help you with this particular thing. So I think, yeah. All right. So now meeting the user requirements for this. So what they're basically saying, here's the question. While filling out positions, the HR department wants to fill out the job responsibilities and job description at the top of the page. The recruiter needs to see the name of the hiring manager and the status of the position at the top of the page. So what they're talking about is different users, and they use the name of the department. So you could assume it's a group of users, right, who want to see the same record different. So that, which tool would you use in order to show the same record differently is what? You want to throw it in the chat, Patrick, or you want to take a guess at it? You remember?
Record type and page layouts?
Exactly, the page layouts, right? So you can assign, now with this one, you don't even need record type to assign it, right? You can just use page layouts to assign the custom HR profile page, a page layout that has the fields at the top that they want versus the fields at the bottom that the other, right? So you could do that. Or you could even try to get away with putting all 4 of those fields at the very top of the page for everybody. But what you're going to find is that if that question was on the test, add all 4 fields to the top of the page. Was that work? Sure. Create a record type and assign 2 different page layouts. Would that work? Sure. But given what we know about this question in this scenario, if one of the answers was just create a record type for each profile, just create a page layout for each profile, that would satisfy the requirements too. And without any other assumptions or bringing in any other understanding of other tools built into Salesforce, that might be the best answer for the test. Does that make sense? So I'm saying that because, anyway, so that's where really paying attention to the requirements of a question that limit your answers to those requirements of what's known, not anything you assume or that you could know or that you might think of, right? They really are good about making the questions hard. All right, so in this which tool question and answer, when creating new technical positions, hiring managers should always have to fill out which certifications are required. Whereas when creating non-technical positions, such as those in sales or finance, there's no need to see or populate the certification fields. So we're talking about conditional requirements and visibility. Both of those are a little more advanced than just one record. You can't use one page layout to satisfy both, correct? So if the answer was adjust the page layout, you couldn't, because you'd be making certifications required for everybody that's using that page layout. If I just create different page layouts, we could use two different just page layouts, one for each. However, to see different fields and or require different fields for different types of records in the same object, it's a better practice to use record types, right? It's just, and it comes down to the no need to see or populate certain fields, right? You want to give more control. So that might be the best answer. The answer I would say is record types, because that's what my PowerPoint says too. Does that make sense, Patrick?
Yeah, I'm a little unclear on when you want record types and page layouts versus just one or the other.
What I would say is if in this scenario, it didn't say which profile was creating the record types. It was creating these different page layouts. So if it's the same profile, but two different page requirements, the only way to accomplish that is with a record type. If it's two different profiles, then the page layout differentiation would be fine. But you're also saying that neither one ever needs to see the other page layout. And the pick list values are the same for both. So when it comes down to who's doing what with this versus that is what I would say. And if it doesn't distinguish who's creating technical versus non-technical positions, then you have to assume it's the same user or profile to satisfy the requirement. And when you have the same user, the only way to give one user two different views of the same object's record is record type. Does that clear it up?
When you use the record type, are you always creating a page layout in conjunction with that?
Yes. Yeah, even if it's the same. Like even if I reuse the same, I would actually clone the page layout for one record type and another. I would not, even if I don't make a change, I would manage it I would recommend managing it that way, because eventually over time you're going to have to do that anyway, more than likely, and it just keeps the lanes separate. That's just, but now again, it's not to say that you can't, versus saying what's a better practice, right? Better practice would be for each record type, give it a page layout, assign that page layout to every profile, even if it's not been, even if that profile has not been assigned the record type. Always assign the record type its own page layout and assign that page layout to all profiles so that there's consistency across the board. And when you do add a record type to a person or a profile, they'll have the appropriate page layout based on their profile. Automatic. You don't have to, and that works at scale, so you don't have to think about it. Does that make sense? Okay. So now you, in this next exercise, you would go create the record types for opportunity records to No, these are contact records, so you don't need to create a process first. Now, we'll say this. There are 4 objects that before you can create a record type, you need to identify a process. Do you know what those are? Do you remember what those are, Patrick? Only 3 of them work in Lightning. All 4 work in Classic. And this is just a pop quiz.
I'm sorry, could you say that?
So when you create record types, there are 4 standard objects that before you can create a record type, you have to address process. I'll give you the one that's only in Classic. Solution. Before you can create a solution record type, you need to first identify the solution process. What is that? On the solution, opportunity, case, and lead objects, the status or the stage of each of those fields is a pick list value that's more than a plain pick list value. I call them uber pick list values. So let me see, let me see if I have an object open. Let me just show this to you because I think I can show it to you. Oh, I have record types. I don't think I have record types in this one yet. Hang on a second. Let's go to my trial org.
Good to see the pros have the same problems as the rest of us.
Yeah. Why? Oh, I know why. It's the wrong username. See if I can find this. Yeah, and I remember now. They gave me a weird username. Ah, come on, man. I want to show this to you because come on. There it is. I had the wrong username. I was using my email because that's the one I want to use. But okay, here we go. Come on now. Did I forget my password? All right, my last try. Maybe it already expired.
The trial log?
Maybe. I doubt it, but maybe. So I'm going to reset it real quick. To take a second. So where were we on anyway? So I'll pull up another one. Yeah, managing all your logins with Salesforce is a daggum tough one. You know?
I like the way Amazon does it when another company adds me as a user in their business. I can just select that from. I have one login to Amazon, and I can just select whatever company.
Yeah, I hope Salesforce takes that on. Honestly, I agree with you. So here it is. I've got it. I had to log in with a different browser because it gets weird sometimes. All right, so when you're doing record types, oh, my contacts suck. I'm sorry. So you've got processes. You got a lead, a sales, and a support process, right? That in Lightning, those are the only 3 processes you have. So what does that mean? Well, before you can do a record type on leads or opportunities or cases, you have to create basically the different statuses already, because to create a process in, I'll show you this way, in the opportunity object, when you create a new stage, right, I'll show you a couple things. So if you create a stage, it says it's a pick list value, but it's not. It's an Uber pick list value. So if you add a new value, you're not adding just some random text. You're adding the name, whether it's open, closed won, or closed lost, what the probability is, and what forecast category, right? That's an Uber pick list value. So you've got to assign a sales process. Actually, let me go back to that real quick. For a sales process, so my stages, let's say I want to add a B2C stage, and I want to add, here's my stages. Right? I've got my sales stages of prospecting, qualification, needs analysis, value proposition, proposal, blah, 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 blah. Those are all great. But let's say I want to create a new one instead of prospecting. I'm going to call it initiating. Let's see. Initial contact, right? The probability, 10%. It's an open stage. It's in the pipeline category. For B2C, first step, somebody calls in, they say they want a computer. I say, great. What are you looking for? I want this, this, and this. Awesome. Now I'm going to give you a new stage of, I'm just going to use that quote. So how does that affect my sales process? Well, in my sales process, I need to create a B2B and a B2C sales process. So I'm going to call this a B2C sales process. And I'm really identifying that pick list value first. So I'm going to take out everything. Whoops. I'm moving too fast and I'm not following instructions. So hang on a second. Got to make it look right. Got to reorder. My initial contact goes to the top. I can save that. So again, processes, my sales process, because I want Let me edit this. I'm going to edit my sales process. I'm going to take out everything that doesn't match, right? I'm not negotiating with a consumer. I'm going to meet them, give them a price, and win or lose, right? That's my B2C sales process. I added a different step, but now my B2B sales process, there's all my fields. I'm just going to go back to what I had before. Everything I had before was the same. But it's and now this is important because when I go create, so now I created that process. The reason I had to do that was because as soon as I create a record type for that object, it's going to ask me, okay, let's call this B2C. It's going to, one of the requirements is which sales process are you picking? So it's really asking which pick list value should I have for this pick list? That's one specific pick list. And that specific pick list is on the leads, the opportunities, the cases, and in Classic, the solutions. That's why it's important to understand that. So the processes get created for those 4 standard objects first before you can actually create the record type. And by the way, you don't have to remember that. You know, only for the test would you have to remember it. Why? Because in real life, you just can't save the process without having selected that value early on. You see, you put a chat in there. Let me see what you said.
Here's a real world scenario. Let's say I'm a new consultant coming in with a new org. That business process, those values, those are in there by default, right?
Say that again?
That business process pick list, those values are all in there by default, right? Like it's the same as when I create a dev org, like that sales process, every one of those choices is already in that pick list.
All of the stages of the opportunity, all of the statuses of the lead, all of the statuses of a case are by default with those standard objects in those standard fields. As you create record types for those, it's going to say, well, wait a minute, those are pick list fields, but they're Uber pick list fields. We call them processes. You need to address your processes first before you create your record types. That's it.
So would I leave the default ones, add new ones as needed, and then do what you just did? Or
yes,
is there a situation where I just want to go in and clear all those out because I'm never going to need
them? It would be highly unlikely that you would create record types without needing different values for those particular fields. It's just that's why we cover it. That's why I demonstrated it. And I don't know like the rest of the course yet. So like I want to make sure we address it. That's part of the business, like that's part of the design of record types is there would be very few situations where you wouldn't address those pick list values. You wouldn't add some or need to adjust them based upon a record type. Now, like in the stages of an opportunity, you might have kept prospecting and used that simultaneously instead of initial contact. But eventually, so you might have the master list. Another way to say it is the master list might be good enough. So when you use record types, you just adjust that master list, one with everything, one with a smaller set, no problem. But either way, you got to address that in Salesforce, technically the way we just did it.
I guess it's more like, so we have the default list. I mean, I've created a dev org and I'm like, I don't want all this crap in here. Like, I just want to get rid of it. And so I delete them all and it takes forever. Because are those things that you generally leave and adjust as needed, or do you start from scratch?
Those 3 status fields are more than just pick list fields. Even though they look like pickless fields to the end user, they drive a lot of other behavior in the system. So you wouldn't, those 3 fields are the exception to every other pickless field you have in your database, more often than not. So they are not willy-nilly. Like that's why this whole little module is built around those. But that's why it's in the admin class, we spend time doing that on both the opportunities and the accounts, with the record types that we, or the, yeah, because you are the cases and the opportunities, because you will never just not use those fields for those objects. That's why they're important fields. Standard, hardwired. So you're never going to get rid of them, right? Let's do a little knowledge check. Universal Containers wants recruiters to see some additional fields when viewing positions that other users' profiles do not need to see when viewing the same position. How do you accomplish that? The minimum requirement on that one is page layouts for one group or another, right? So one page layout for one recruiter profile, one page layout for everybody else. Record types would make sense if the requirement was to display different fields for different positions, but it says different fields for different users when viewing the same position. So we need to have, in order to see, yeah. So when yeah, so for different, when you want to display to the same user 2 different views of a record, you have to have record types. If you're just displaying different views to different users, then you can just use page layout. What do record types control? The 2 PLs, page layouts and pick list values. I think that's pretty clear. We said it right now. All right, and I think this session, we're going to do business logic next. And for today, between now and when we're done, which is, we got another good, almost 2.5 hours, almost. We're going to do business logic. And I think we'll get through this, but we'll see. It depends on you, Patrick, and whoever I think I need to expound upon. Oh, first time I wore contacts in a while, so I'm a little, maybe not the best choice today, but you know, we'll see. So, business logic is really starting to use. Oh, your lunch supposed to come. I saw the chat. It's totally cool, Patrick. I see you there. Just remember to, don't forget about me. So in our example company, we need you to understand how to use the features of the Lightning platform to build efficient and effective applications. What does that mean? We're going to create custom formula fields, and all formula fields are custom. Create roll-up summary fields, which are never standard, always custom, and use operators and functions. So let's talk about how we're going to do that as we go through, first with formula fields. So here's the requirement. We need you to track the overall score of each candidate who's been interviewed. So that's math. What's the overall score made up of? Well, we have to create some rating fields and then do some math and create an average, right? So a formula field would do that. What's a formula field? Oh, another one is we need to know the number of days that a position has been open. That's a formula field. So every time you look at those positions, it's going to calculate, right? So we're going to create a couple of formula fields. And the first formula field, this is an example of it in the picture, is calculate the average of the 4 rating fields. So communication skills is a 1 through 5. Experience is a 1 through 5. Leadership skills is a 1 through 5. That's what those fields are, because I've done this class before, and that's what it is. And then the recommended for hire is a checkbox. So what this says is add the score of these 3 fields. So 5 points, 5 points, 5 points. And if they're recommended for hire, add 5. So if the recommended for hire is a checkbox, the value, if true, is 5. It means it's checked. Then you add 5 points. If it's not checked, you only add 1 point. That gives you 4 numbers divided by 4, which gives you the average of all 4 fields. So that's a good formula field. Easy peasy. So a formula field derives its result from other fields, expressions, or values. And it's calculated on runtime. So if that record is pulled up in a list view, in a search, in a report, then it's going to run that formula field so that all you'll see is the displayed result of that formula. Okay? So the only data that's stored in that formula field is actually the formula. So,
Quick question.
Yeah, question?
There's no functional difference between the standard formula and the advanced formula, right? It's just the editor.
No, there is one functional difference. The simple formula only grabs field from the current object. The advanced formula will grab fields to use in your formula from any related object.
But I could still type those. Like if I was a formula wizard and knew everything, I could type whatever I want to in the simple form.
Correct. The palette itself just operates as the palette. It's going to look at the syntax of the formula you enter. That's it. That's right. But the tools that you have at your disposal for point and click selection will be different for simple than it is for advanced. That's all. But if you're a whiz at formulas, you already know that. And since I am not a whiz at formulas, I'm going to take you at your word that you are a whiz, and I'm going to use you in the future. Oh, I forgot to put on my little vest to show that I'm part of it, but it's hot down here now. Today's a bright, sunny day, so I'm not going to put it on.
I did not say that I was.
What's that?
I didn't say that I was.
Well, I'll give you the rule. If you're good at formulas, you're going to be good at formulas. Everybody else is going to struggle with formulas. And that's the only way to become good at formulas is to struggle with them. You have to wrestle your way through to excellent. I chose not to wrestle that much. I'm okay at formulas. I mostly kind of know what to ask somebody good at formulas to do for me. And I think that's just a solid way to be. And so don't kill yourself if you're not good at formulas. Understand the basics.
The formulas.
What's that?
I'm good at copying and pasting the formulas.
Oh, copy and paste formulas I'm excellent at. But it takes smart people to do them. So do this on your own. Now, a cross object formula field is what is and I say it's an unofficial term because there's no place in the interface that you're going to see the term cross object formula. But when you want to display information from another object, you're limited to a couple of ways to do it. One is a formula field that pulls that data in and just puts it on the page as a read-only field. That's what they mean by a cross-object formula. And then when they use that example, that's what they're talking about. Some of the questions, and the difference is display versus store. If you want to store data from another object, you're really creating a lookup or master detail field that grabs the name of the record you're relating to a record, and thereby creating a relationship between two tables, which does display data from another object and will get updated if that other object is updated, but it doesn't just display. You can literally edit that field to change the connection from record 1 to record 2 of some other object. So this job application uses lookup fields, right, to connect the candidate with the position on that job application. But on the offer object, if I want to see the position and the candidate that you're making the offer from, I don't need to look up to the candidate. That's already on the job application. I can just display it from that application to that offer, or from that candidate field to that offer, however that works. That's a cross object formula field. It displays this. You want to see data from one object to another. You don't want to interact with that data. That's a cross object formula. So you could create that on a child object to reference data from parent objects up to 10 relationships away, which is really a crazy way to get it. But what you're doing is you're displaying the source data somewhere else. So you're getting that truth from where it lives. And if it needs to be changed, you know where to make the change organically. I mean, organically, like at the origin of that. So you're not tracking your way. So you want to find the original data to organically display it from one object to another through whatever trail of relationships you need. Make sense? Okay. And this is how it looks when you're going to find that field in one interface. When you're digging for that field, right? So you're making sure that you're following the trail of gators, I call it, because in Louisiana, when the gator's to the left, it's coming at you. And if it's going to the right, it's leaving you. That leaving is less, and gator is great. So greater than symbol, that's how I learned it in Louisiana. But first, whenever they taught me that, first, second, or third grade, that's where I learned it. So there. Anyway, so the scenario is you want to make fields from the related objects visible. So create a formula, put the candidate's full name to display on the offer object, and a formula to pull the position title to display on the offer. Think of it like a mail merge, right? You always want to add the data where it lives most appropriately. All right, that's a little bit about formula fields. We go deeper a little bit in formulas in the admin class for Salesforce, but we don't actually touch the roll-up summary fields in the admin class. We talk about it a little. I talk about it in my classes because I know it shows up on the test occasionally. But it's just not, it's part of that 30% that's not in the course that could be on the test. So roll-up summary fields actually store data about the children of a parent object from the master detail records of the children. So let me say that again. So if you've got the only one that this works on in so if you got, I'm going to use two custom objects. So if you got a custom object, say offers, let me see. A candidate will always be a child to an application. If you want to count how many candidates you have for a position, then you could do a roll-up summary to that job application made. Well, I'm confused. I don't want to confuse it. But when you have I'll do it a simple one. If you wanted to know the number of open opportunities that you have for any particular account, you could use a roll-up summary that would tell you what that number is. And it's always going to be accurate because anytime somebody saves a child record, it's one of the things it's going to do. It's going to update any roll-up summary fields connected to that child record. Because there's a hardwire connection, a required connection between the child and the parent, it'll always, anytime you save a child record, it'll always inform the sum, min, max, or average that you've calculated to the parent. So if you wonder how many contacts are in an account, I don't know if you can do that, but if you could, anytime you add a contact to that account, it's going to adjust that number. If you take one away, it's going to adjust that number.
Can't do average.
What's that?
You can't do average.
You can't do average ever, or just on this screenshot?
Ever. It's probably one of the biggest sorts of, like, you're doing this stuff and they ask you, like, oh yeah, of course you can do average, but you can't.
Oh, well, you have to create a formula field based on the roll-up summary field that then calculates the average. So there. So, and then you could, of course, create a filter. But it does store, here's the difference between a roll-up summary and a formula. The roll-up summary stores the result as data. So if you did a data export, you would get a real number in there. Does that make sense? So, and it's recalculated anytime one of the children are saved or deleted. So anytime you create or edit one of the children or delete it, it updates the parent. So here's calculating averages, as the devil would say. We want to see a list of all the combined review scores on each job application. So we need to create a roll-up summary field for the number of reviews on the job application object, a roll-up summary field for the review scores on the application object, and then a formula field that calculates the average review score for a job application. So you're right. You're ahead of the curve, Patrick. So that's what this little exercise is.
I remember.
What's that?
I've just gotten it wrong so many times. I remember.
Right. There you go. Yeah, look, it's like the hardest thing about certification is you've got to do something that I don't recommend, which is mostly remember stuff about Salesforce. I don't recommend
averages. It just when you're listing off the things you can do with roll-up summary fields, it's just like a natural. It just rolls off your tongue. You're like, oh yeah, share, sum, min, max, average.
Yeah, no, but you're right, it doesn't. I thought it did too, but I don't like in the real world. If you were trying to do that and you didn't see average as a choice, eventually when you hit you, I can't do it, right? Because RTS is the secret to getting stuff actually done in Salesforce. Whatever the screen says is what it's true. And I get in arguments all the time, by the way, with other trainers when we're developing training materials. They'll say something and I'll look for it on the screen. I go, can you show me where what you just said is on the screen? And they'll go, well, what I meant was, I'm like, I don't give a stink what you meant. You said, and I'm taking you 100% literally, that what you said, the way you said it, is what's on the screen. And if it's not, that makes me 100% right and you 100% wrong. And there's no reason to argue about it because I'm the one who's on the right side. So let's not argue about something stupid like you being wrong. Let's move on and correct it. But they take that the wrong way. They think I'm attacking them. And what I'm attacking is the fact of what they said. But people don't like that, which is why I tend to work better, as a team of one.
Please be sure to invite me to your flow training class.
Oh, flows, man. Flows, I'm struggling. They're a combination of really easy and really hard. So
you tried to add a lookup field to a flow yet?
No, I haven't. I don't think you can.
No, you can, but it's going to take you 4 hours to figure out how the hell to do it.
Yeah. No, it's going to take some guy in India or Philippines 4 hours to figure out how to do it. It's not my job.
I'm speaking from experience.
I hear you. All right. So now there are, what is this? So operators and functions are built into the formulas. And a lot of, so, and look, by the way, we're now getting into the beauty and the beast of automation in Salesforce. The beauty of Salesforce is completely automationable. The beast is getting it so that it lands to your target audience correctly. So In this scenario, previously automated communications to candidates were impersonal and obvious. We want to improve the quality of emails with merge fields so that you're actually presenting the data you have to the end user, which, by the way, starts to make more and more important this little thing I call data integrity. If you really want your systems to work efficiently so that you can satisfy customers faster and easier, both in the selling and the service process, you got to have touch points where you make sure the data is up to date, because humans by themselves will think it, but not click it and not make sure it's that way. So we need to do things like, if the numeric month is 1, then call that January. 2 is February. If the numeric month is N, return N month's written name, whatever that is, right? So you're telling the computer the logic you need for it to choose what it needs. So this is before, this is a reminder that computers are the dumb machines in the system, that they only do exactly what you tell them. So if it doesn't come out right, where did the human get involved? Because the computer is obedient. It does exactly what it's told to do. So if statements, to create a month, right, you'd have to use this complex nested formula. By the way, you would just copy this one. So if the month date value of the created date equals 1, which is, by the way, what this is saying. So for the created date field, which is system field, the date value of that is going to have a numeric value. That's what date value returns. So the numeric value of the month of the created date field equals 1, then that means insert the word January instead, or Jan, or Feb, whatever you want to do. And then it's going to go down. Then every if-then statement is if this, then that, else the other thing. And the other thing is another if statement. So if this, then that. That's what's between the parentheses and the comma. This is called the logical test. And this is called the result if true and the result if false. So if this, then that, else the other. So this, that, and the other is what an if statement is always comparing. And if the other is another if statement, you can keep doing this all the way down the line. You run out of characters at some point with this if statement.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. So
I was just going to ask, why wouldn't you use a case for this?
Why would you use a what?
On that last screen, I was wondering why you wouldn't use a case.
Oh, well.
It looks like now they're showing you use case.
Yeah, so that case is another function that does, and I think it means it's logically equivalent to the if statement, but it's more efficient because it evaluates the formula of created date, date value, month one time. So it's a little more elegant, which means it's a little more efficient, which means it takes up less space, right? And at some point in time, all that matters. I was talking to a buddy of mine. He says he's thinking about leaving his job and becoming a day trader because he thinks he's gotten good at it. I'm like, okay. I said, remember, like, there are people who work, there's a fight for space near Wall Street to get transaction servers closer to the New York Stock Exchange server, because if they can get 1 block closer, that 2 nanoseconds faster travel time, because the electricity is traveling from their server to the stock exchange faster than a competitor, might actually give you an edge at scale. So you might make enough money to pay the increase that would justify the increase in rent for those buildings. There are some of the, I worked a project for 3 weeks on Wall Street in a building right next door to Wall Street, and it's a staffing company. I did some training for them. And man, that's some of the crappiest office space, but you know, it houses computers that I'm sure are connected right to the Wall Street thing. So anyway, the reason you're doing all of that, the case instead of the if then, is because there is a maximum size of number of characters of 3,900. So 358 versus 1328, it's just a small amount of characters. You saved almost 1,000 characters. That ultimately in computers, it's less zeros and ones, less storage, less movement, faster execution, and translating to a faster. Those are little things that shave little bits of time. You're now thinking like a Olympic athlete versus a weekend warrior.
It's also easier to debug. You don't have 15 parentheses at the end of the formula there.
Absolutely. Because the more times a human touches the keyboard, the more opportunities there are for errors. So we want to add a visual indicator of the rating on a job application. Those with a high rating should display a green light. Those with a medium rating should display a yellow light, and a low rating should display a red light. How do you take advantage of a number of sample images available in Salesforce? So the image function can insert an image based on the result of a formula. I hate these formulas. I have to copy and paste them most of the time, but basically you're saying if the score is 4.2 or greater, display image, and you put that URL, else this image, else otherwise the last image. So really what you're saying is, what's the image if it's below the minimum, like that's the red, and if it's above that, you can put yellow, and if it's above that, you can put green. Or whatever images you want.
I think at least 2 questions about this on the test I took. Like one was which of these formulas will result in is a valid way to, and I think I had to choose 2. It was like 2 different ways to display a traffic light in a formula. And how often is this like a real world use case? Like
all the time.
Okay.
All the time. People like human beings. If you take my philosophy of the acquisition of language and the evolution of human beings, and you believe people have been here longer than 6,000 years, so I know you're a rational human being. I'm not making fun of people who believe the Earth is 6,000 years old. I'm making a point for those that think it's not.
I went to a creation evidence museum one time in Texas. It was amazing.
Right? They believe, and not good for them. Good for them. Believe whatever you want.
Giant piranhas weren't there. I went there to see the giant piranhas. They weren't there.
They weren't there, right? Exactly. I like what some guy said. Was watching. If we evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? It's like, well, that's not how evolution works, brother. But okay. So that anyway. So the point is, human beings acquired, grunts, pokes, and signals was the first language. And some guy decided to do Pictionary on a cave wall. Humans like pictures. We actually saw, images were the first thing we really got. And then describing the images was grunts, pokes, and signals. And then transferring those images to a fixed something was the display of that. Human beings like images. So this, and I put it in the chat. I put the formula you need in the chat, and I'll put it in the YouTube video as well. In the comments, let me put it in the comments real quick while we're at it.
I'm sort of capitalizing on your time because, well, I'm the only one here, so I might as well, right?
Yeah, no, it's fine.
I have a technical interview where I'm supposed to build out an org based on their requirements, and I'm supposed to throw in some, I don't know, some flashy bits, I guess. Should I throw in the traffic light?
Hell yeah. That's a good one. Traffic light's a good one. Wait a minute. Did I just add the public comment? Why is it not? I don't understand you, YouTuber. YouTuberless. I added a public comment. I'll put in the description later. I just want to make sure it's there. Anyway, all right. So, yeah, find those formulas out. If you're doing that for a job interview, find those formulas out in the world. Pick a couple that are really awesome. Rock and roll. All right, so we'll do a quick knowledge check. What type of field can be used to display information from a related parent object record? What's the key word there?
Well, the word is a little confusing. I mean, I want to say roll-up summary field, but related parent object.
Display. I want to display information. I don't want to count. I want to display. It's a cross-object formula. That's a key word that's different than I want to use or change information from somewhere else. That's a lookup field versus a roll-up summary, which calculates. So display, select, or calculate are three words that I think I can tune in on pretty reliably in the test. True or false?
We can reference formula fields in a formula, right? Given certain parameters.
I believe you can. The challenge with doing that, you can reference formula fields in a report, a custom summary formula in a report. I don't know if you can. No, you can't. I don't think you can, and I'll tell you why. Because what if one formula runs before the other? Now you have a matter of you don't have the value yet. You can do it in a process builder because process builders will calculate in order of the actions in which you schedule them. So, or a flow might do it, or an Apex code. If you need control of that stuff, you got to be careful of using something that you don't have control over. You can't just assume that it's going to do it in the order you want it to.
I seem to recall stuff about like you can have a formula that references a formula as long as it doesn't use certain types of fields, like a dynamic field like date or something. But maybe I'm mixing that up with something else.
I would go with, depending on what they're saying. Look, the answer to most questions in Salesforce is yes. And here's a little test taken too. If there's two answers that you've narrowed it down to, and one of them makes Salesforce look bad and the other one doesn't, and you don't know which one it is, just go with the one that says Salesforce can do something versus saying Salesforce can't do something. That's just like a good rule of thumb. Salesforce doesn't like to admit what it can't do as a culture. So just know that, right? That's kind of the dealio with Salesforce. They don't like to look bad.
So will this answer get me arrested?
What's that?
It's a new version of will this answer get me arrested or land me in prison? Will this answer make Salesforce look bad?
Exactly. All right, so quick knowledge check. Number 2, true or false? Roll-up summary fields can be used with custom objects in a lookup relationship. True or false?
False.
False. Got to be a master detail relationship. Oh, what's the difference? The difference is they don't work. You can't get you'll try to create a roll-up summary field. And if you don't believe me, or if you chose that one, here's the training method to learn it. Go try it. Go try it based on the true and false questions. That's the way you learn how to pass the test. If you're going to use a test dump, which I don't recommend because that would put my certification at risk, but if you did on your own, aside from my recommendation, the best way to learn from a test dump is to actually go test each answer against the question and get your fingers on it. If you spent the time doing that, you're going to figure out where that stuff lives, what that stuff does, and how you figured out it worked or didn't work. And if you didn't know, then you know what to go study. Number 3.
Here's the moment of truth.
Number 3, true or false? Formula fields may reference other formula fields. Okay. Yeah, it turns out, according to the answers I'm looking at, it says true. It can contain references to the values of fields, operators, functions, literal values, or other formulas. So there you go.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. I didn't look
No,
at
no, it's fine. I would be very careful, and I would make sure I could test it before I said that. Now I tested it with this. I'm trusting this, but here's the other thing about Salesforce. That shit could change. I mean, Salesforce is always, and these tests only get updated once a year. So there's 2 other releases that could impact it in reality versus on the test. So be careful.
I felt like the material on my test was
old.
Yeah, it was. I felt like I was learning things in the real world that were newer, and the questions were sort of antiquated.
Could have been. Could have been. Remember, all of these tests were written before Lightning. So there's a lot of classic built into the test that they haven't purged yet. And really, they can't purge it 100%. Number 4, when do the results of a formula field calculation get saved in the database?
This is the order of operation, right?
No, never. They never get saved. The results of the calculation never get saved. They only display when you run the record. So runtime calculation only. Only the results of a roll-up summary field get saved, which is number 5. And that's calculated anytime one of the children are modified or created.
Is there a way to sort of like with Excel, you can copy the value and paste only the value instead of the formula? Is there a way to convert formula data into actual numbers?
It would require some type of export, or if you were running a flow and then capturing that as a variable, or you did the same thing with like an Apex code, right? You capture the value, the value of a formula as a variable, and then use that variable in another calculation. The challenge, that becomes really like that's not going to be required for a basic level certification like this. That's where architecting and your platform developer 1 and 2 skills, really those platform developer skills like PD2, I would imagine, and architecture and all those other things, because those kind of calculations are dangerous at scale, at big data levels. If you're calculating things that then change while you're still doing the calculations that impact other, like that's, you got to have the right kind of mind to make sure you understand the flow of data and electricity. Like, no kidding. Like that's some ninja stuff, So you could, but I would shy away from those things. I would probably more than likely, like I think a simple way to do it might be a process builder where you take that value of the field, store it in another custom field, and then add a date to when that was true, and then store. Like I had a customer just recently. I'll tell you an example of one. They wanted to know how long a customer waited for a response from their customer service reps until the case was closed, right? So if they got an email from a customer, created a case, and it took 10 hours for the customer service rep to respond, and it had to be that response, not the auto response, right? Of course, there's an automatic response. That's all other stuff you're doing to address that human interaction. They tried to do it with one field, and I went in, I said, no, you got to create another field to hold the total. So between email and response, might have been 10 hours, store that 10 hours. Now it took 8 hours for the customer to respond. That's another field you'd store. How long it take for the customer to respond? So they're trying to figure out the cadence and the timing so that they could speed up their side. And because it's what took so long to solve the problem, we actually only took an hour. You took 28 hours to respond to us. So I get it took us an hour, but in an hour, what it took us 2 days to do it, but really it took you most of that 2 days to get back to you, right? So whatever that was. So that's managing the logic of the data. You got to be really careful how you do those kind of things. Anyway, all right, we're going to get into lesson 9. Are you good without a break? Are you solid?
Yeah, good.
I am too. I probably need to take a break somewhere along here. Let me see something real quick. Just as a real.
If you want to take one, I can make more coffee.
Let me just see something here for a second. Yeah, I'm gonna take a quick break. I'm gonna pause my share on the slide for a second. Can I pause share? Nope, I'm actually gonna do something different. Hold on. I'm gonna do this. Google Timer. Take a 5-minute. Can you make coffee in 5 minutes? I don't think you can, but what part of the world are you in right now, Patrick? I can't hear you. What?
Secret location.
What time zone are you in?
Central.
All right, so, all right. You want to drink coffee this late, it's on you. Can you do it in 5 minutes?
Sure can. That's why I have Nescafe.
All right, perfect. Perfect. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Let me pause. I'm not going to pause. I'm just going to leave it there. Just going to close. All right, I'm back. Back in the New York groove. What can I add?
You can go ahead if you want.
Are we ready? Oh, there we go. Hang on a second. All right. Here's my comments. All right, there's a second. Let's see. All right, here we go. All right, we jump back early. I love come back early. That's the best. All right, preserving data quality. Equality. Let's go. Let's hide this little thing. All right, so they've noticed that their users are experts at creating bad data. By the way, most of your users will demonstrate the ability to put in the weirdest thing in the face of everything you try to do. So one of the ways to maintain excellent data, number one, before you even think about creating validation rules, is do reports. Use those reports. Here's a question I ask companies all the time, and I'll bet you can't deliver a good answer. If you're listening to this and you happen to be a sales leader, answer this question. How well do you think, or how effective do you think your sales managers are at using Salesforce in their weekly one-on-one meetings with their sales reps? That one question alone has so many layers. Number one, are your sales managers having weekly one-on-one meetings with their sales reps? And if they say they are, how do you know they are? Are you not capturing that data in Salesforce? Number two, how do you know they're using Salesforce and not a spreadsheet? Do you care? Well, I can tell you this. If you don't care and you don't inspect, it's not happening. You don't have to say, I'm sure they're doing it because I told them. If you told them to do it, you can be sure they're not. Sure of it. You want 100% certainty in your sales, you must inspect what you expect, because the troops only do what the checker checks. That's your job as the leader, to perform those checks. And if you are asking people, you're asking people to lie. Here's my mic. Drop my mic. That's it. Stop asking your people to lie to you. Once you inspect the data and you discover that the regular inspection of data and the sales forcing your users to actually go correct that data, making sure that it gets corrected, that might solve your problem right then and there. That's all you need. That might be all you need to solve your problem. That's it. That's all you need to solve the problem. Inspection. So, but once you pass that, if you really want to make sure that you just interrupt, it's wasting too much time, you want to interrupt that back, then create some validation rules. So in this exercise, we're going to create a validation rule to enforce conditional required behavior. Conditional required behavior, that is something like, in order to say you had your first contact with a lead, you better have contact info if you're going to move it to the next stage, right? We're going to create a validation rule using the regex function to ensure proper data format. We're going to do one with the VLOOKUP to enforce data consistency. That means VLOOKUP looks up data to compare it to something else. And then we're going to create a validation rule to prevent records from being added or deleted. So this is fun. And I would not be able to write these from scratch, just for the record. Sorry to let you know that. But I train. I don't do that, but I'll show you how to do it. So the really complex validation rules, what I can tell you is this: go to the Answers community, Salesforce community, and find the person that does this all the time. If you're swinging out on your own to write a rule like this and you're not absolutely positively solid on how to do it, do yourself and your org a favor by getting help to do it. I promise you that is the right move. If you let your ego get in the way and you create bad formulas and bad rules and bad reports, ultimately you're responsible and accountable for that data being inaccurate. And I would say you found your way to be fired. You forced your way to be fired. Don't do that. Use the help of the experts, because there's somebody in the community that does this enough and consistently excellent, that, and they're helpful enough to reach back to you in the community and give you the help you need. I promise you, there's somebody. That's one of the beautiful things about Salesforce, and I'm not trying to just blow smoke about it. The community is where you get your best answers, you know. So we noticed some problems with the data. We got positions without hiring managers and candidates with no zip code. The zip code and the state don't match, which is why wouldn't it always? Going to get to my pet peeve. I think I'm going to love this. All right. So
I actually tried to implement what you talked about before about the zip code lookup, and I was kind of surprised to find there's not really a clean, simple, built-in method to, like, I don't know, make an API call to a zip code lookup.
Well, if you're in professional or above as an addition, then your address fields, you can just start Google. There's a Google interaction where you can find the right address and it fills in all the right blanks. But you're right. Why are we asking for city and state? There's a thing called the U.S. Postal Service that already has it all figured out, and it's not only accurate, it's 100% accurate. And why every database and every web form in the world doesn't require the use of that, and why there isn't an application just for that, I don't know. But it never ceases to annoy me when I call up for my health insurance or the bank or AT&T, because they kind of suck. Yeah, AT&T, you want me to? I'll go over the details about why I'm saying that. So I'm not saying it because it ain't true. I'm saying it because you owe me money, because I bought a phone and you didn't follow through your rules because you let somebody lie to me, and then you gave your salespeople your service people no way to help me. And I mailed a letter by hand instead of mailing one, and I got one coming to you. So you owe me $750 and I'm going to get it. So anyway, that being said, you're more than welcome to reach out, AT&T, and I will document my journey since May of last year. Validation rules improve data integrity. They improve your data processes. They prevent invalid data entries by users or other systems, and they enforce role, profile, or user-specific constraints so that depending on who's entering the data, you can get better control of it, right? Because you can drive behavior with data, and validation rules help you do that. So let's evaluate data against a criteria. Like, what are your rules? What do you need to do your business, your work in your business? So let me just see something real quick. I want to see. Okay, it's good. So now I'm going to do, wait a minute. What are my Zoomy controls? My Zoomy. Huh. Oh, look at that. Okay. Wow. Found a way to hide those little video boxes. I wasn't looking at the menu much. Okay. So let's just walk through this scenario. Position can only be saved if there's a hiring manager associated with it, right? So the way Salesforce works when it comes to anything being done automatically, and I'd like you to think of a validation rule as an automatic stop to a bad data entry, right? So when you write a formula or when you save a record, a true triggers action. So if somebody enters invalid data and attempts to save, the validation rule says, hey, the hiring manager is blank. If that's false, everything's fine. It's going to move forward. But if it's true, it triggers the error message to say, hey, you can't do that without a hiring manager, right? So true triggers action, TTA, not the training associates. True triggers actions. That's every validation rule. You write it so that the condition you want to avoid is true in your formula. That triggers the correction action, right? It triggers the action to stop saving the record and prevent bad data, okay? So that's the rule you're going to create. You just saw it on the screen, is blank hiring manager, and then put on the error message where they need to see it. Every position must have a hiring manager. You are sales forcing your users to do complete work, not sales asking them, okay? This is where the sales forcing comes in. So, are validation rules executed for fields that are stored in the object but not part of the displayed page layout? Absolutely. Covers all of it. Are validation rules executed when loading data through the API or data loader? Yes.
Yeah.
Are there exceptions?
The screen, I think.
What's that?
I think you need to move your slide ahead.
Say again?
I think you're on a different screen. You're reading something different.
I'm adding some questions to this. Just a couple teaching points.
I thought you were reading the knowledge check.
No, not. I'm just bringing up some things. So if so validation rules are executed when loading data through the API or the data loader, they'll kick back an error. There are some there are no exceptions to that. So when you're moving data into your org, if there are validation rules, every record gets tested against that validation rule, as well as system validation rules. And if a new rule is created and there's already existing data stored that violates the rule, will Salesforce catch the problem? The answer is no, not until that record is edited and then attempted to save. So if you've got bad data in, it will surface itself on the next time that record tries to save. But if you have bad data, you create a validation rule, unless you do a mass edit on all those records, nothing will happen. But because nothing happens until a record is saved or attempted to save. And if a user does not include a reference to a hiring manager when creating a new position, when will they be notified of the omission? Only time they get notified is when they attempt to save the record. It prevents the true formula, triggers the action of not saving the record until it's corrected. So it meets the parameters that you have. That make sense? Those are some questions, some teaching points. So, but you can make them conditional. So for example, you might want to say for an opportunity that you can't save it in the proposal stage until you've got a products and quantities attached, right? Because if you're using the products object, how would you create a proposal without configuring the products, quantities, and prices? You couldn't. So how could you be proposing anything? That's not logical. So in order to make sure that all the opportunities in that stage have products, you create a conditional validation rule at that stage, versus you would not want products included in the very initial creation of an opportunity, because that could just be an idea of something you want to sell. You haven't made any connection or contact with the customer, so you don't know anything about what they really want. So you can make things conditional. So you can also, there's a couple of functions that help you determine if you're dealing with new values or change values or previous values, right? So is a field changed? Was the prior value this? You might limit the choices they can make to that. You might limit them skipping steps in a stage process. If it's initially prospecting, they can't go right to proposal because there's certain requirements your company has, or you're trying to prevent somebody from, blowing smoke or sandbagging or hiding, those kind of things that you have to look at. Because here's the thing, you might think your users aren't that smart, but I promise you, they're probably way sneaky smart more than you think. And you can Salesforce them to do things in the proper order. So for example, if your sales process is 90 days and that it's never shorter than 60, and somebody tries to create an opportunity and close won it within 1 day, you know they've been using something other than your Salesforce to track the life cycle of that customer, that they're sandbagging, they're holding back so they can release the hounds and hide from sales leadership what they're actually doing, right? And then just try to present what they've done as a result to kind of bypass your systems. You can prevent all that. It's called Salesforce, not Sales Ask. So, and you can define, you know, these validation rules to kind of reveal what the rules are in your company. And that's important.
Does there come a point where you are chasing diminishing returns with?
Yes.
Yeah, like, I mean, eventually somebody's going to find a way to break the rule. Like, for example, I have a lookup field on a flow for someone to search for an existing contact.
Yeah.
If they don't search for the email address, or that email address is in there, they enter the email address, it will give them an error and say, sorry, that email address already exists. So go back and, you know, either select a contact or enter a different email address. If they enter that same email address a second time, it's going to bomb out. Like, I haven't figured out a way to stop them from doing it a second time. But I mean, is that like how thoroughly do you try to stamp out these attempts? I mean, it's like,
what I would do in that regard is I might add a counter field, like add a custom field that holds a number. And then when they try to do it once, they get the message, put a little 1 in that, update that field with a +1. If they try to do it again, do a +2. And if it gets to 3, then send a note to their sales manager saying this person is continually attempting to create a record without following the processes, blah, blah, blah. And even send them a task. Hey, contact your manager to let them know you're trying to violate policy. And they'll go, what? Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Your manager's been contacted, letting you know. Like, you could, again, is that worth it? It depends on the size and the cost of the problem. So the answer is, we had a situation with a company where they had to look up, for them to get access to an account, right? The way it worked was they went from a local database to a national database. So if Home Depot was already in, somebody already owned it, they needed to request access to that record. So they'd search for the account, and if it wasn't already in the database, then we forced them to search it for Dun & Bradstreet database. Okay, now search for Dun & Bradstreet. Like, they're not in our database. Now search Dun & Bradstreet. Because if it's in Dun & Bradstreet and this is the right account, then we'll import all the data so you don't have to type it in. And I saw it. Somebody did it right in front of me. They went through all those steps just so that the account was already, because here's what they figured out. If they lie about it being in the database already, if they lie about it, if they say no and lie about it being Dun & Bradstreet, then they could create that account and have immediate access to that account in order to create an opportunity to make a sale, right? And I told them, I said, okay, let them do it. The moment they won that sale, if that account already exists, then when it comes time to pay a commission, they nullify their commission. They don't tell them until the commission check comes out. You say, wait a minute, I thought I was going to get paid on this deal. No. Thank you for violating the process along the way. Here, we recorded it. It was, you searched for it. We recorded the search. You said it didn't exist. You said it didn't exist where it did exist. And then you created it so you could get an opportunity. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to train you. You're paying for us to train you to not do that again by not getting a commission. So do it as much as you want. We'll come back and train you how to do it every time. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it because their top salespeople did it. And they wouldn't enforce it. That's a leadership problem. I'd go replace the leaders if I was a CEO, right? Because you could do that in Salesforce. Hey, and I wouldn't tell the salesperson until they got their commission. And really, I wouldn't tell them until they asked about the commission. Because some salespeople pay what I call the ADD tax. They Salesforce their way to violate the policies, then take the money away until they ask you about it. And they go, hey, you owe me all this money. I'm like, no, see, you violated the policy, and here's the data to support it. What do you want to say about that? And they're going to go, you should have told me. We did. It's called training. You certified on the training. Now what? We did tell you. You chose to ignore it. There's warning messages every time. Like, yeah, man, that's people being assholes. That's the word for it. So you can't. So I look for ways to Salesforce an asshole out of the company because they're damaging your company more than not following the process. Anyway, that's my point.
There is a line though where, you know, where we are here as either admins or consultants to provide what the client is asking for, even if it doesn't make sense, right? I mean,
to some degree, yes. Like look, there's only so much you can Salesforce people to do. It's really a different conversation when you have to do things like that. I mean, there's probably a better conversation you can have than how do I get my people to do what they said they would do, you know? So, but those kind of data circumstances that actually, like for me, in the kind of work that I do with companies, personally, the kind of work that I like to do with companies is that I don't want to have to write a rule that hammers somebody. I'd rather just write something that flags for a human to make that interaction because it's much easier. But human beings avoid those crucial conversations. Managers, like sometimes you pick the wrong manager because they're not intervening with those things that are happening. And it just takes a little bit of difficult conversation willingness to be able to have those things and get it worked out. You don't need to call HR and fire people necessarily, but it does reveal whether you should and why you should get rid of certain people in your organization. You know, so I would say I'd lean toward the side of, you know, like you said, warning them, but also recording that you warned them so that when you actually have data that they can easily inspect, and then it's on them as a leader to do something about it. You know, is that easy? No. Now in the chat, I put the formula for this particular task. So this one is the duration field should not be blank. It should contain a value between 1 and 365 days, right? So that's a quick and easy one. And I posted that in the chat for YouTube. So that's where it's living. All right, enforcing the proper data format. This is beyond the data format of the field as controlled by the system validation rule, right? So remind you that when you click save, the first thing that Salesforce checks is the data received in every field the type of data expected. So are numbers in number fields, is text in text fields. Is there an email in the email field, or is it something else? You put a number in the email field, it's going to go, no, that's a system validation, unique, required, and format. Now for this is, did you enter the data of the right type in the format we expect? So is the name, did you put the 5 digits plus the zip 4 like we asked, or did you put whatever that might be? So, and enforcing that format can be done with a regular expression. That regular expression is, for example, like for phone numbers, zip codes, billing state. So is it do you have GA for Georgia or GEORGIA, right? You can do those initial formats. So in this example, a regular expression is the uppercase value of country USA or US, and the zip code is not 5 plus 4 digits, right? So you could also do so, or it depends on what you're asking for. If you're asking for the 4-digit zip code, because that's what you asked for, this is what it would do. So what you're looking for here is, I want the format of the zip code to be 5 digits or 5 digits plus 4 digits. Maybe. I think that's how that one is. There's another expression that I have in my notes that I'll post in the chat of the WebEx, and then you could see that for yourself. Fair enough? Let me put that in the chat. I'll show you what the notes say, and then I'll post it in the YouTube video link later. So again, I'm not really super duper familiar with this, but this is what, when you're trying to enforce the difference between just a 5 or a 5 plus 4, you want to give alternatives that look for what you're trying to get, right? So is the country name USA or US? And is the zip code 5 or 9 digits? And is it either 5 or 9, not 4 or not 7, something else like that, right? Or 10. Ooh, did I put everything in there? Let me see something real quick. Yeah, I put everything in there. Nope. So I'm going to do examples. I'll put the examples in one better. So examples of and you could kind of, I don't know, you can't see this on my screen, I don't believe. Yeah, you can't see it on my screen. So examples of regular expression, what does it match? AB equals a single character, either A or B. I can't show it there. Maybe I could show this. In just get a blank. I'll show you what the notes say, because honestly, this is where I'm glad I got this, because I need a little practice with this. Whoops. Let's pop that up a little bit bigger. So you want a single character here, like this is an example of a regular expression, equals A or B, etc., right? Or you could have a single uppercase or lowercase, so AZ. This is a digit. It's a shortcut for 0 to 9. This is a white space character. These are things you can study and probably get out in the world. So in this, does this match the expression 1 AABZ for 4 characters and then any digit. That's what that is. And again, this is me learning formulas, not teaching it. So I apologize. I'm not that smart with formulas. So that's just my thing. So anyway, so the exercise here is, I'm going to put this in the chat for 9.3 in the YouTube chat. Oh, really? There we go. All right, so that's me trying to build it out nice for you guys. So the formula I'll put in the YouTube chat. For you, I'll put it in the regular chat. 9.3. So that's helpful. All right. Is that cool? That helps you guys if you want to practice it. I'll give you those formulas, how it looks. So I love this one, by the way. I can't wait to implement this formula because I would imagine, wow, damn it. The best they give is an article for a help article. Let me do Command C just to give it to you right now. For the VLOOKUP. So VLOOKUP says if they put in a zip code, you want it to look up to match the city and state so that it's always consistent. So you just have to have it in there right the first time, and then it returns a value by searching for a matching value on another different field, right? So it's always going to pick that right city for you for your database. And that's going to be so this is a very complex one, by the way. This is optional. I'm going to read the notes to you so I get I'll see if I can get conceptually what it is. So the formula contains a condition that evaluates whether or not the batch load item field, which is a checkbox, is populated. This is a way to ignore validation rules when developers are loading data in batches. There's a field on the candidate object that is hidden from all profiles except for the admin. If the batch load item field is checked, then the validation rules will be ignored. So this is a trick for developers who want to ensure that data formatting is enforced when users enter records to the UI, but they don't want their batch loads to fail if the users don't meet the specified criteria, the developer users. So here's what we're doing this batch data load field. It can also be done by checking the profile of the user making the change. So another way to look at it is if an admin's doing it or a special profile is doing the batch load, you can ignore certain fields versus somebody else. So for this one, build a validation rule like to ensure that when a zip code is entered, it matches the state that was entered. So the rule should be ignored when data is loaded in a batch. All right, so if you're good at this, then I challenge you to create a similar rule that validates city and state. All right, enter the city of San Francisco and the state of Georgia to produce an error. So if we're going to use a table of zip codes, typically, and the VLOOKUP function to validate zip codes, you would use a data loader to load that zip code data. So we're not going to do that here. One, we haven't yet talked about or learned about data loader, and two, we're working with a very small set of data. So it's no big deal to manually populate records as in the file. But that's really what you would need to do, right? You need to go to the post office, download their zip code data, make that a practice that you do every year in case there's changes that they make, whatever their normal case is. Any questions about that? Oi. All right, that's ugly in terms of instruction. I apologize. My first time through. Definitely going to practice that one again. All right. So preventing data loss. Want to make sure that once a job application is approved, that you can no longer edit the record, right? So a validation rule can be used to prevent a record from being edited or deleted. In this case, they're going to be used in conjunction with the roll-up summary field. So first, you want to build a field on the parent object that creates a sum of the number of child records, right? Then the next step would be to create a validation rule on the parent object that conditionally prevents changes to the number listed in the roll-up summary field. So you got to make a validation rule on the child records. And if the user tries to add or delete a record, the validation rule will prevent them from doing that. So basically, if you created, you got a job, and then you finally filled the position, you want to create a validation rule that says, okay, no more adding candidates, no more changing candidates, and no more editing this record because we've completed that part of the process. So you're preventing anybody from doing anything else. So that's going to be
is changed, is new, and I think there's a third one that you use there.
Probably could. Yeah, I don't have the exercise in front of me to give you that, but hang on. Exercise 9.5. This is one of those that can work with you on your own.
Fine, I was just taking a stab at the answer.
What's that?
It's fine, I was just taking a stab at the answer.
Right. So what you'd have to do is create a validation rule in the job application. And basically, at that level, if you've got a roll-up summary field, like for number of reviews, and if that's changed, then you wouldn't be able to save that on the job application. You wouldn't be able to add a review. Let's see. Yeah, that's all you do. And I haven't done these. I got to go to when I get a test org, I'll go through all these exercises. But if you have trouble with it, again, send me one. And then 9.6 is a work it out yourself. Entering, make sure that, now I got to tell you, one of my pet peeves with credit cards, have you ever filled out a form and they go, what kind of credit card are you going to use? It annoys me. Why? Because the first digit tells you which kind of credit card it is. Why are you bugging me with something I'm about to tell you? You just let me put in my credit card number. It'll be fine. So
Why do I need to know anyway?
Yeah, why do you need it? Well, yeah, it doesn't do anything. Like, it's old, dumbass IT behavior.
Well, what are you going to do? Drag out the manual card swipe imprint?
Yeah, shunk. I got to get the right one. Exactly. It's a pain in the ass. So in this one, again, if you run into trouble with this one, email me. I'll send you the help with that one. And these are the considerations for different functions and when you might use them and why, these are more like elegant in that regard. So yeah, I don't know enough about VLOOKUP, but the one thing under here, I tell you on this slide, is changed in prior value. If you use that in Workflow rules only when the record is evaluated every time it's created or updated, edited. So otherwise, you wouldn't know if you missed it, only if you only evaluated at certain criteria, or if it just is created. All right. Where's my... Okay. Let's go way dominant. So the question is, when is a validation rule evaluated?
When a record is saved or updated.
When it's either saved on from a page layout or when it's imported using data loader. Validations rule.
That can be disabled, right?
What's that?
You can disable the validation rules when you import data, right?
In data loader. I mean, in data import wizard, you could, but not in data loader. The only time you would have it in data loader is if you put a condition on the validation rule based on either the, like say the profile, the user, or some other preconditioned data that doesn't matter because you're doing it, something like that. And that's a more advanced reasoning for that. Typically, you want to, validation rules are executed anytime a record is saved or created, right? What happens when a user attempts to save a record and the formula defined by a custom validation rule evaluates true for that record? Two things happen. The record is not saved. It triggers the action of not saving, and it triggers the action of displaying the error message. So that's always true triggers action, always, right? Just like a workflow rule. Did the record save? Is that true? Yes. Did it meet the evaluation criteria? Yes. Did it meet the criteria? Yes. Boom, boom, boom. It's going to trigger the action. Where can a validation rule error message be sent to display? There's two places. One's at the field where the error occurred, or any field you choose, at a field level or at the top of the page. And it really does change in Lightning. That's mostly a classic thing. And it used to be the case, and I like to say this because I pointed out, because back in the day, kids, if you had an error message, a validation rule on a date field in Classic, you couldn't choose that field because the calendar, it would bring you to that field, and then the calendar pop-up would cover your error message. They've since fixed that in Classic. So they did do a little improvement. What's a use case for a validation rule? Anything you can think of that a user might do incorrectly, but seem to be correct. The one we did that might be on the test is something to do with insures, zip, postal codes are in the right format. The data is a number, but you need a little more detail than that. It needs to fit a specific format than that. All right, look at that. We're getting into automation. This is awesome. So I say that because let's see how many automation. Yeah, I think we can get through this whole section before we end tonight. So this is good. Hopefully, we'll see. Oh, I'm glad to be done with formulas and rules. I'm not a rules guy anyway, like in life. I wouldn't say I'm a rules guy. I like to know what they are so I know what I'm breaking and when. Strategically break the right rules. But really and truly, not a rules guy personally. So I apologize for my lack of slick, smooth knowledge, but I now know I need to go back and when I do those exercises and examples to be a little more fluid in my description for those that are going to challenge me, which thank you, Patrick, for not challenging me that much. So, all right. What's that? Do what you can. All right, awesome. So this lesson, we're going to cover the actions that can be triggered by process and workflow, which is really good because workflow does 4 things, the same 4 things that the approval process does. They're very limited and they're very easy to remember. Process Builder does a lot more than that, and it's a newer interface. There's better functionality, but both of them kind of work in the same way. You should be able to know the difference. And this is a productivity principle that I really want you to hone in on. Whenever you're faced with a decision to take action, you really have two choices to make a decision. You can defer the decision, but that's not what we're talking about. Decide what you're going to do now, and decide now what you're going to do later. So I have this little website called salesforcehabits.com. And on the opt-in page to that free training that you could take right now is, and I encourage you in the video, decide to start that program now. Now is the time to decide to be more productive, to change your habits as a salesperson. But if you can't, and it might be, it's 2 weeks, it's a week before Thanksgiving, and the next 5 weeks are going to suck. So I don't want to do this until the week after Christmas. Great. You're deciding now when you're going to do the thing that I'm asking you to do, either now or later. So what that does from a productivity standpoint, it takes and closes that decision loop. Salesforce taught me that from a productivity standpoint. When you're making a decision about doing some automation in the future, taking some automated action, Salesforce wants to know what's the immediate action you're going to take. And if there's other actions you want to take, let's schedule that action now. Right? And it knows when there's a scheduled action that if something changes with that record, it'll decide whether it's still appropriate to continue to do that action or not. But you've already decided to take that action. It's really a powerful personal productivity mindset tool as well. If you're not going to decide the day you're taking the test, decide the day you're going to decide to take the test. Make the appropriate decision now so that you're not left wondering or waiting, and then Lodi takes into consideration. Lodi is the law of diminishing interest. So that the longer you take to make a decision, the less likely you're going to make that decision. It's called procrastination. Instead, a proactive way to make a decision is to say, and by the way, I'll frame this inside of Rudy Giuliani's book on leadership. I read that entire book, and I had a university professor friend of mine read that entire book. And with both of our knowledge and experience of leadership and reading, he had the reading, I had the leadership experience, we discovered one lesson in that book valuable to a leader, and only one out of Rudy Giuliani's leadership entire book. So I'm going to save you the time and effort of reading his book. By the way, this is 20 years later, and he's more wacky now than he was then. A leader should only make a decision when he has to. Let me say that again. The key decision that a leader must make is when they need to make that decision. So a lot of people struggle with making decisions because they naturally incline that they want to gather more information. That's fine, but you've got to have a drop dead date by when you need to make that decision. Other people make decisions without enough information. That's impulsivity. Those people need to actually stop and evaluate how much time and how much effort they're really going to put in to gather new information to make the best decision. And at decision time, you only make the best decision with the information you have at hand. You might make a decision and 10 minutes later get new information. You might make a new decision, or that ship may have sailed. You go, well, too late. That information didn't come in time. So we continued to march with what we had, the best way we had it. That's it. That's the best you can do. So Salesforce teaches you that over and over again with workflow and process builder. The moment you save that record, you make the decisions about what you're going to do now and what and when you're going to do what later. That's it. All decided now. It's all scheduled now. You're now free to evaluate the next record, right? So take that on in your life, and take that on as how we deliver it inside Salesforce. All right. So processes. Let's talk about that. Processes are the Lightning process builder process scripts, if you will. So the Lightning process builder authors processes. The workflow rules author workflows. They're, as we say in New Orleans, similar but different. Okay? So in Lightning Process Builder, the evaluation criteria is the object that you're going to apply the rule to, the criteria the record must meet to trigger the rule, and then the time trigger of when the process will carry out those actions. And they are immediate or time dependent. What you need for all time dependent actions is a solid start date. So your start date cannot be ambiguous. And in Process Builder and Workflow, I think it's the same conceptually. A solid start date is the date and time that record was created. If it meets the criteria, it will schedule the actions. If it doesn't meet the criteria, then the only other solid date you have is from the time it finally meets the criteria, subsequently meets that criteria. Then you can create from that date immediate and future actions. You cannot create future actions based on any time the record's updated. It's got to be a specific moment in time to schedule those future actions from. So that's critical with future time-dependent actions. All right. So a process automates using this visual interface that can have the criteria of when it starts, where it starts, and the criteria whether to do anything or not. And this is another visual to look at the true triggers action that I talked about. If a record is created and edited on an opportunity and you want to evaluate that record, if it meets the criteria, that's it. It's going to trigger this set of instructions. Immediate actions, and then wait so many days, and then it's going to stop in this case, right? So I think this is a wrong evaluation because, it's going to be, was it closed won? True, do this. False, was it closed lost? True, do that. False, whatever the next step is, do something else. Process Builder executes in the order in which the instructions are given. So if the criteria is true, it's going to make those immediate actions in that order. Whatever order you put them in, it's going to execute it that way. Workflow does not work the same way. And then when the time delay hits, it's already got those actions scheduled. Boom, 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 boom. It's going to follow those. And if you want to make a change, you got to clone the copy of this, make the change, and then activate the cloned copy, and you'll have versioning. And I always recommend keeping a couple of versions open. I mean, a couple of versions there, but you don't need 40 iterations. At some point in time, your older legacy items, you can just delete those processes so they're not clogging up your visual indicator about, moving, testing, and those kind of things. Because that's where you need to test it. So these are the actions supported in Process Builder. Mostly the one that Process Builder gives you the biggest bang for the buck is creating a record. So I'm going to create, instead of in Workflow, only updates a record. So creating a new record of any object is a benefit in Workflow. You closed one an opportunity, you want to create an order. You close an opportunity, you want to create a task, right? All those things can be done. Updating records is similar to workflow. Emailing alerts is similar to workflow. Oh, the only record that workflow can create is a task, really, technically speaking. So I shouldn't say it doesn't create a record. But you can even do quick actions. Those are object specific or global. That would like record a call or send an email, any of those things. You could have it submit for approval, trigger a flow. So if you need some logic and you've got that built in a flow, you could have that trigger it, launch some other process in Process Builder. Oh, Quip. If you pay that much money for Quip, I recommend you use it. Okay, it can also kick off an Apex, right? So it can, so that's a whole nother level of doing stuff. You can send a custom notification, which is really a notification to your users, or send a survey invitation, which is something very specific. So it kicks off a survey. So you build that out, send off the survey, and you're good to go. And this list has constantly been growing because it's enlightening. It's on the roadmap. It's going to keep doing more. So these are some use cases. Send an email reminder to the recruiting team. Update the mailing address on the child contacts. If the billing address is changed on an account, that's a common one to do. Create records and notifications based on the stages of a position, to schedule interviews, to maybe confirm an interview, blah, 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 blah. Create an order record on an opportunity, like I said before. So those are good use cases. So some of the best practices for processes is creating a process for an object and then building your criteria from the least likely event to the most likely event in that order. So and then use your evaluation criteria in that record so that there's not competing processes that occur on an object. So, and in the setup of the criteria, there's a thing called recursion. And what recursion does when you're deciding how the process kicks off, just when it's created, I would do created or edited. Recursion is adjust the process for changes that are made during the process. So it's evaluating the record every time you change something on the record. It's sort of like what a flow or what an Apex might do. It's a more advanced way to do it, but you can evaluate a record up to 5 times during the process to see if you're making all the right turns. That's a very complex feature to address. You must really know your database well, because you could get yourself caught in a loop that you can never get out of, and that is going to translate to a crash or the never-ending spin on your screen. So be very careful about the data you use to determine the value of recursion. Be very certain that you're not going to get caught in a loop, because that could happen. Or it could create 1,000 chatter posts, and that's bad, right? Or 6 chatter posts, really. So that's why the limit of 5 times. So hopefully you don't get more than 5 mistakes corrected that you got to correct every time that runs this process. So it's just something to be careful of and aware of. We'll talk about recursion later. We'll talk about it more in a later module. Processes that start with when a record is created or edited cannot have scheduled actions if there are no criteria selected. So what that means is if you don't have, if you choose no criteria, then you can't have a time delay because it doesn't know when. Every time it's edited is an ambiguous start date. So you need a certain start date, like I said before. You need to select criteria, either the condition or the formula, and you have to select that advanced selection of yes. So think about workflow evaluation criteria when it's created or when it's edited. Every workflow criteria is created, but when it's edited to finally meet or subsequently meet the criteria. So you want to have a specific start time. So created only ever happens once, and meeting the criteria only ever happens once in theory. Most, right, you can adjust for it, but that's how you can. So at this date and time, the record was created, 6 days from that date, or the record finally made closed one, it finally met the closed one criteria on the opportunity. Now we can set a timer, but it can't be ambiguous. The start date or the timer cannot be ambiguous because that would make Salesforce look bad, because that would make Salesforce not perform properly. So you got to think about ways that Salesforce is going to ensure that it can always do what you're setting it to do. Make sense? All right. So what's a platform event? Because that's one of the criteria, right? When a record is created or edited, a platform event or some other process. So platform events simplify the process of communicating changes in data and enable developers to deliver secure, scalable, and customizable event notifications within Salesforce or from external sources based on a publish subscribe architecture. So that's a long way. So it's a platform event is a special object. So it's a contrast to a custom object that you can't update, delete, or view in the user interface. The API name ends in a double underscore E. So an instance is called an event message, not a record. You can't query a platform event using SOQL or SQL. But so if you have an event that you're tracking so something happened and you're just keeping a transactional database of that, and that thing happens, it can trigger an event, a process, or a flow. They're similar to custom objects, but they don't end in double underscore C. They end in that double underscore E. And publish event messages using processes, flows, Apex, or APIs. Or they're a platform event message that enable real-time integration between Salesforce and an external system. So for example, somebody fills out a form on your website, they opt in, right? An event might be they double opt in to your marketing messages. So now you want to, from that event, you then want to trigger some other process or workflow, right? They signed a DocuSign for a non-disclosure agreement. That's an external platform event that would then trigger. Another way that you might practically look at it is like a webhook, and Zapier uses webhooks. When this event happens, it signals a message. You sent a message in workflow to your fulfillment database, and it signals an event that it received the message and the inventory of that item was in stock. So now you're going to trigger an event. That makes sense? Those are all platform events. Don't need no human interaction, or it comes from some other event. Something happened and we recorded it. So in this example, 10.1, the company policy says that a hiring manager must always take part in the interview process. So we want a new interviewer record to be created automatically for the hiring manager whenever a new position is created. So what we're saying is we create a position and we identify Patrick as the hiring manager. Now Patrick is going to have an interviewer record for every applicant on that position, right? So we're just automatically doing that. So we want to build a process that creates that interviewer record for the hiring manager of a position. Does that make sense? And then every time an applicant is added, they might create other processes. So again, if you run into trouble with this, let me know. All right. Scheduled actions. And I don't know, I guess you noticed I changed these, Patrick, to 3-hour sessions. I figured we could get through more because February 2nd is my day to do my demo. And I got to make sure I get through and get my practice demo orgs. And when we get through all of these, I'm going to get a couple of demo orgs that are exactly made for this training class. And if you, Patrick, want to go through the exercises, we'll set up some sessions where we'll go through those together so we can kind of work through them, because just following the exercise doesn't necessarily mean you have complete understanding. But that'll give us a chance to do just all the exercises at the end for anybody that has watched all the videos and now wants to practice before I go through and knock this puppy out. Or if you got any feedback, like, Dominic, you really suck at that one section, like, please tell me if my training is sucking, because I need that, and I'll figure it out. I'll practice it more.
Well, if you did, I'm sure it's on the video I missed, so don't worry about it.
Thank you. Make it public. Thanks a lot. That'd be great. No, that's fine.
I didn't see it, so it doesn't matter.
I ain't scared. That's right. So again, remember, scheduled actions happen after immediate actions. They're based on time. And then one of the ones I like to think about is, think about the most common one, which is an escalation rule in cases, right? So a case gets created, a timer starts that evaluates that record for escalation, because it's trying to prevent you from breaking an agreement with your customers, their service level agreements. So that time lapse is evaluated from when the criteria is met or a specific date and time on the field, on the record. So that's why you got to think about the evaluation criteria. When do you start that timer has to be certain. The only two certain times are in Process Builder or Workflow. When the record is created, that's a certain time you can start counting from, or when the record finally meets the criteria, that's a certain time. So when you save that record and it meets the criteria, I can start a timer. Every time I edit that record, it's just another edit. I can't start a timer because I don't know if it's the right time. So if it's not when it's created, it's got to be when it finally meets some data criteria.
These scheduled actions we're talking about in the context of Process Builder and workflows?
Yes. That's it. Yeah. So for Process Builder, all of those pending scheduled actions are listed in pause flow interviews. In Workflow, they're going to be in time-dependent workflow. And this is important. If the user that saved the record that triggered the action is no longer active, it automatically assumes, right, that next action shouldn't happen either, since you don't have a user who's going to be responsible and accountable for following through on whatever that automation is. So one of the things that as an admin or a developer you need to account for is what happens when you deactivate a user. So you got to look at your overall automation and decide, and that sometimes will actually prevent you from deactivating a user. So in the admin test, you know, they don't, I don't think they describe it this way as much, but if you try to deactivate a user, one of the reasons why you can't is because they're actively involved in some type of automation. So Salesforce is actually trying to prevent that from happening. So depending on what happened, Salesforce won't let you deactivate a user. You have to freeze that user, take them out of all those automation steps, and then you can deactivate them and free up a license. So that's just one of the considerations of that. So we want to create a process that will escalate offers that have been open for 2 days to say, hey, they haven't accepted our offer. Get up on it, man. Do something, right? So anyway, so we need to set that up, and that's your, and again, if you have any trouble, I'll demo it in the next thing. All right, workflow. Love workflow too. Workflow works. Don't be mad. Don't be scared to use it. It's a great tool. It will do the job. It's reliable. And you can automate your work. And it's, I think it's a much, sometimes, unless you need to know the order of execution of the actions, workflow is just fine. And it allows you to not muck up your process builder on that object as well. So it's really, you know, and I think the best rule is if you can get by with workflow and it's clean and easy and like simple, doing workflow. If you need to add more complexity or know the actions they're going to take in a particular order, or it fits your overall workflow processes and that you've documented for like, you know, for an opportunity, you're gonna, or a lead, let's say, that you wanna use that tool to really enhance your sales and marketing process, fine. Skip workflow, don't confuse it. But you know, workflow is great if you don't have a complex automation. So workflows set workflow actions into motion when the criteria is met. So the evaluation criteria, the 3 evaluation criteria, I don't know if we're going to have it, are when the record's created, and every time it's edited, or created and edited to subsequently, that's the word you got to key on, subsequently meet the criteria, right? And then if it meets the criteria, true triggers action. And those actions will either be now or later, right? So you set up the immediate actions, you set your time triggers, and then those time-dependent actions will fall every time, right? Because that's what triggered the workflow. But again, they can only be delayed. I mean, they can only be scheduled if you've got a specific date, usually when it's created or created to subsequently meet the criteria. Any questions on that? So the 4 actions, which are also the same 4 actions in the approval process, the only record you can create is a task. You can update the record or it's really any parent record, but maybe, yeah. You can send an email to anybody or an outbound message, which is a computer to computer, like a post, right? So it's a SOAP message. It's a good distinction. Now, we'll tell you this about the task. You may remember this if you took the admin test already. There's always a question about assigning a task and you've chosen a role that has more than one user in that role. Doesn't matter what the role is, doesn't matter what the group is. You're creating an opportunity for Salesforce to be confused or have to choose, which can't happen in Salesforce. Salesforce can't risk making a bad choice and looking bad. Just look at every keynote ever delivered at any Salesforce, right? All those keynotes are super slick, super polished. No one goes off the rails. I should never do a keynote at Salesforce for that reason, because I'm going to go off script. I guarantee it, right? But because that's what I do. I'm trained in going off script. I'm an improvisational, impromptu speaker. That's what I did when I competed for speech. I was an extemporaneous speaker. I'm damn good at it. And, but I'm not good for Salesforce keynotes. But unless you're trying to pick me for a keynote, then give me a shot. I'll do it. That's what I've noticed about those keynotes, right? So Salesforce does not operate off any ambiguity. So if you're creating a task and you're assigning it to a role, let's even say it's a role on the account team, and you added 3 people to the support role on the account team, but the company policy was only 1, but you did 3. So think about that role. The user created an opportunity for confusion. So if there's a task that's created for the support role and the user added 3 people, who should decide who gets that task? The same person that added 3 users to that role, right? The same person that created the ambiguity should also define where that task belongs, because they did that. So that's the example I want you to use. Even if it's a role in the role hierarchy that the user didn't have anything to do with, the same philosophy applies. If the record that triggered the creation of a task can't assign that task to one user specifically, then that task must get assigned to the user that owns the record that kicked off the reason for that task. So it goes back to the ownership of the record that caused Salesforce to be confused. Salesforce by default is going to give it back to the owner, because they can decide who gets it. They decide. Anyway, so that's what you ought to know. The owner of the record must decide who owns that task if Salesforce doesn't have a single person to assign it to. So outbound messages are computer messages. Like you're sending fulfillment data. Think of it like this. When you order from Amazon and they're going to ship your package within 2 days, they've got to assign the delivery person that's going to deliver that package. They got to pick the company, and then that's going to get that package with Postal Service, FedEx, somebody else. And then from there, they got to decide, then for whatever reasons, you might decide who gets it. That's a computer-to-computer message. That's computer decisions that are based on previous data, and there it's going to go. So you can just let the computers do the talking, and it falls into some other computer workflow. So this example is going to have you do that. This example is going to have you put it into that outbound message so that you as a platform app developer, set up those computer-to-computer messages, right? Whatever that stuff is, you're going to do it. I haven't done it yet. So think about what has to be done, and then contact me when you need help with it. So we also, this next exercise is a work it out, which is, this is great practice to see how well you know this. We want to set the account rating for customer accounts. How would you set up that rule? And you want to use the annual revenue of an account as a way to establish the account prospect rating. I wouldn't, but simple, right? So it's a simple, probably if-then statement. If the revenue is between this and this, they're hot. If between that and that, they're warm, and anything below that is cold, right? So it's simple. We've done that kind of exercise before. It should be pretty easy to work out. Oh my goodness. With 15 minutes to spare, which of these are available actions in Process Builder? That's a dumb one, because I'm not giving you any choices. So any one of the possible actions that I showed on a slide earlier, right? So in that regard, can I find those? Anyway, so post a chatter, create a record, kick off another process, submit for approval, any of those actions. Number two, which of these are directly available as an action type in workflow but not process builder? Create a task and send an outbound message, or in workflow, that also translate and also send an email and update records are available in both workflow and process builder. Delete records is not available in either.
Why does it say that create a task is not? Is it because they're saying directly available? Because I thought you could.
Directly.
Right. I mean, I know you can't send an outbound message in Process Builder, but I thought you could create a task in Process Builder.
You can, but it's not create a task. It's create a record, and then you could choose task as a record, which is really task or event. So they're being really specific.
Or pedantic.
Scheduled actions in Process Builder are stored in pause flow interviews. And then in number 4, you could send an email from Workflow or from Process Builder, either way. Process Builder, a good answer. They're not showing you the choices, but automatically set the status to closed when the date close is entered on a position, and send an email to the hiring manager when the status of a position is set to close, post to chatter when a position is set to open, like all those different things are Process Builder. Notify certain people of certain stuff. So with that, do you have any, we're not going to do approvals because I don't think, we got 15 minutes. Let's see if we might be able to go through approvals. Let me see. Yeah, I think we can get through approval process, 15 minutes. Let's knock it out. You want to knock it out?
Class.
I'm going to do it without you. You know, if you leave, I'm still doing it. All right, so automating business process with approvals. Again, remember I said before that approvals have a couple of different things in the process. Number one, when the record is submitted for approval, you have to set up an entry criteria. And then when that record enters the approval processor, if you think about it that way, there are initial submission actions, right? So you can have multiple steps in the approval steps, but initial actions are things like prevent anybody from editing the record, set the disk to that, set that to whatever those actions are, so you prevent anybody from messing with the record. And then you can have your approval steps. And those approval steps, so initial submission action, things like lock a record, assign a task, send an email, update a field, or send an outbound message, like letting people know this record needs to be approved. And then the decision criteria and approval assignment for each step, you could set up decision criteria for each step in the process based on who's approving it. You could have auto approve or rejection based on the quality of the data itself. Like you could have your certain standard things that the discount's too high, go ahead and automatically reject it. Or, hey, the approvals, all the variables are fine, automatically approve it. You can assign your approvals. You could allow delegated approvals or not. And then you could also have your rejection behavior. So if the person in step 1 rejects it, you might send it back to the person who submitted it, or you might send it on to the next approver because the weight of their rejection doesn't stop the process, right? You're rejecting it, but you're sending it along with your rejection. It might be a vote. So it's set up as either unanimous or at any rejection, what do you do with it? And then, of course, there's final approval actions, or like there's the initial actions or the final actions. And finally, it can be in 3 states: final, approved, or final rejected. It's like closed won or closed lost, but it's internal closed won and lost. Or the user submitted it for approval. They started getting some initial rejection steps that didn't stop it. So they pulled it back to just make they recalled it. What are the actions? Open it up for editing, like unlock the record, take away but you have a history of what happened in the approval process. So it's really just your internal process to make sure that people are following the rules, or if things fall outside the bounds, other people become responsible and accountable for letting it happen, letting that data do. So how do you define that approval process? So what defines what happens initially? Like what records, what's the criteria for entering it? What happens when it's initially submitted? How do you route the records in the steps? What happens on the final approval, rejection, or recall? All of those are things you need to decide. And the 4 actions that could occur at any step in the process, or final actions, are the same actions as workflow. Send an email, send a message, create a task, or update a field, all the way along the line. So what I would also say is, use the right tool for the right result. You could create Workflow and Process Builder as a way to approve records. You could. But why not use this tool that's already been vetted and works really well and does a lot of things automatically for you, so you don't have to program the locking of a record. You don't have to do this. Like, it saves you a lot of time and effort. So use what's been built, even if it's not the newest tool available. So Workflow and Process Builder are triggered when a record is saved. Workflow rules are one set of criteria and actions. Process Builder is multiple criteria nodes that each have a set of actions. So it's a little more complex. These 2 can be modified or deleted. And in order to do that, and they could be, you just have to turn them off, if you will, before you can adjust them. Approval processes are triggered when a user submits the submit for approval action button, or they're auto submitted by a process or flow. So but they work the same. They have that entry criteria, the step criteria, and the step actions. Those actions happen at the initial submission, at rejection, or approval actions. And there could be actions for each step. They have some attributes that can't be modified in the approval process. Like, you have to have somebody that's going to approve it, so, and you have to define those things. A skip step is a step that has criteria defined to determine whether or not an approval step is required. So basically, like I said before, if you submit an opportunity for approval and you have a discount on it, if the discount falls within your normal parameters based on whatever criteria you set, it might automatically approve, or it might go to the next step regardless, depending on what has to happen for those. So
the approvals are automated more often or not?
Say that again. If what approvals are automated more often or not?
Do you find that generally they're automated or more manual?
I'm not sure. I think if you use the approval process, it's oftentimes, depending on the organization, going to be depending on the organization, is it a multi-step or a single-step approval process? Does one person approve it, or does it need multiple checks? And then you got to decide what happens upon, if it's multi-step. If it's single step, then you're really dealing with final approval or rejection. If it's multi-step, then you have to deal with the rejection steps along the way. Does it need to be a unanimous approval or conditional upon the last approver? Usually is how that goes. Does that make sense?
In terms of the launching of the automation process, are people more often using the submit for approval button, or are they using a process builder or a flow to launch that?
I hope the answer is submit for approval. I would say submit for approval is used because it's been used in Classic for a long time. In Lightning, some people may get a little slick with Flow and Process Builder to try to bypass the approval process, as opposed to using that. That's why I say use the approval process. There's built-in features that you don't have to recreate, right? It's just easier. Like as an app developer, could you recreate opportunity records in a custom object? Yeah, but why? Would you recreate the case record in a custom object? Yeah, but you lose more than you gain in a lot of ways. But it depends on the license you're building the stuff on.
But you can have the approval process, and then that can either be launched manually by the user or it can be launched automatically.
Is that your question? Yeah, no, I just think the approval process is a tool built into Salesforce that's been highly reliable and vetted very well. Use it as much as you can. Don't try to use something else for something that already works. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. That's kind of one of the guiding philosophies of Salesforce. So in this scenario, pause this, knock it out, create yourself an approval process, and we'll go from there later on. So a couple options you have for the approval process, because I'm trying to get done now in 4 minutes. So what do approvers see? Well, depending on how you set up your org and each user's personal settings, approvers can receive and handle approval requests using their email, the mobile app. You could create an approval request tab. You could have notifications on the bell icon. You could have them show up on the home page and a record detail page. In Lightning, you cannot approve in Chatter. If they switch to Classic, they can approve something in Chatter. So that's just one of the distinctions of it. In order to be an approver, the user needs to have at least read access to the object and the record. So typically that's not an issue, because typically your manager is the approver, and given all things security model, your manager can usually see all your records because they're above you in the role hierarchy. Lightning users can't approve from the home page by default, but there is a standard Lightning component that can be added called items to approve that an admin or a developer can add to the Lightning homepage. Lightning users can use the approval request tab by going to the app launcher and then adding that tab. So you can actually do that as well. And then Lightning users can click on the notification bell to open approval requests and then approve from there. So what's only thing that's different is in Lightning, you can't approve with Chatter. So parallel approvers, a record can be sent up to 25 different users simultaneously for approval. So it kind of depends on the flavor of your organization. So when you're setting it up, you can let the submitter choose. You can have it automatically assigned using the user field selected earlier, or the manager. You could automatically assign to a queue, or automatically assign up to the approvers. This is where, in a multi-approver situation, you approve or reject based on the first response. So you decide what happens at each step on an approval or a rejection. Whereas you could require unanimous approval from all of the approvers. Those are different behaviors that you decide based on your org and your requirements. So here's one, an items to approve component to the homepage. That's a lightning exercise. And the next one is auto submit approval processes with process builder. That again is a lightning process builder exercise. And when we come back tomorrow, we'll pick up here before we get into flow for automation. Is that cool? 3 hours of this stuff, and I'm ready to take a break. But I'm teaching a class tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, so we'll pick back up Friday. If you have anything in the meantime, please shoot me an email at support@salesandtechnology.com, and I'll be happy to answer that on my breaks and off time. Is that cool? I'm going to end the show, and then we'll go. Thanks a lot, Patrick, for being here. Thank you for watching the videos. If you're watching this at some other time in the future, I look forward to supporting you in your growth and development as a Salesforce resource. And Sales and Technology Consultants is building an army of part-time consultants to serve the small to mid-sized market, which means you keep your full-time job and you help me help small to mid-sized customers develop and work on their Salesforce so that you can make money on the side and I can serve customers at a better price. So check out more later when I get it all squared away, and we'll go from there. I'm going to be done with this. Oh, I got to hit my stop one. Hey, Patrick, any questions, comments, or concerns from you?
You know, I feel like I know this stuff pretty well, but I absolutely bombed this section on the test.
It can happen, man.
I don't know if that's because I'm more familiar with Process Builder and Flow, I think, than approval process and workflows. Maybe approval processes is where I really went astray on the test, but I mean, like, I'm not exactly getting any sort of huge epiphanies going through this stuff that I'm like, oh, that's where I screwed up.
Well, you know, here's the thing. Some of these questions are just hard. And you don't know, like it conceptually sounds right, but there's a little detail in the question that derailed you. So pay close attention to the words. And what I'll say is, as you go back and test these exercises over the next couple of days, test what's on the screen and look to see that you got a real clear understanding of the words. But I think I have a solution to some of that later. We'll get to that at the end after we're done with this part. Cool?
I think if I was doing it in person at the test center where I could write stuff down, I think it would definitely be a help.
Yeah.
Reading these questions on the screen and trying to mentally process all of the information in there without being able to write it is a challenge.
Absolutely.
But again, I sort of feel like a lot of this stuff is just, if you go on Trailhead, there's really only one thing about workflows. There's not a ton of material out there because I don't think they're focusing on it.
I agree. I know it's tough. So give it your best shot, dude. That's all. Give it your best shot. All right, I'm going to say goodnight for now, and I'll talk to you on Friday. See you on Friday.
See you later. Thank you.
You got it.